Good evening once again. I am Stephanie Ruhle, and this is the Midweek Nightcap. We are now 257 days away from the midterms, and the fallout over the Epstein files continues. Today, House Oversight Committee lawmakers, they traveled all the way to Ohio, home of billionaire businessman Les Wexner, who sat for a closed-door deposition as part of the Epstein investigation. Wexner was a longtime client of Epstein's and considered a key figure who facilitated Epstein's connections to the rich and the powerful. An unredacted portion of an FBI document from 2019 described Wexner as a co-conspirator. But later that same year, an email says there was, quote, limited evidence regarding his involvement. In a statement submitted to the committee ahead of today's deposition, Wexner insisted he's done nothing wrong and has nothing to hide, describing himself as naive, foolish, and gullible. And Epstein himself, well, he was a con man. Wexner has not been charged with any wrongdoing, and he has said that he cut ties with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein was indicted on sex crimes in Florida. Here's what Congressman Robert Garcia, a ranking member on the committee, said after part of the deposition. Watch this.
There would be no Epstein Island. There would be no Epstein plane. There would be no money to traffic women and girls. Mr. Epstein would not be the wealthy man he was without the support of Les Wexner. We are committed to ending this cover-up. Right now, as we speak, over 50% of the Epstein files have not been released to the public and to the Congress. Donald Trump and Pam Bondi are leading a White House cover-up to protect billionaire, wealthy benefactors, whether it's Mr. Wexner or whether it's anybody else. And that has to end now.
I'd like to see those files. Let's bring in our nightcap. Philip Bumpus here, MS Now columnist and contributor. John Della Volpe, director of polling at the Harvard Kennedy School Institute of Politics. Charles Coleman Jr., former New York prosecutor and civil rights attorney. And Tim O'Brien, Bloomberg Opinion senior executive editor and Trump biographer. Okay, Wexner's relationship with Epstein dates back to the 80s. I get it, he's an older man, but how crucial is his testimony for this investigation? It's pretty hard to believe someone who forked over that much money to Epstein could say, like, gosh darn it, I was just so gullible.
A lot of holes here that Wexner plugs up if you ask him the questions. What I found most alarming was that there had not been a lot of conversation, if any, between DOJ and Wexner before now. The fact that this is the first time that he's being interrogated around Jeffrey Epstein is perhaps the biggest problem and the biggest indication of where things have gone wrong. If ever, for me as a prosecutor looking at this, there was a notion of substantiating an idea of a cover-up, it's that. Because prosecutorial initiative says, look, we go where the facts takes us. And you can't look at Epstein and look at his network of wealth and of connections and not have those facts take you to Wexner. So I'm sitting here wondering, Stephanie, how is it that this is the first time that he's being questioned?
Okay, that's exactly what I want to ask you about. Like, how are they, is the next person they have to sit down with Alex Acosta? Like, on what planet? Like, if Robert Garcia is right, which he is, Epstein would never have had a fraction of this wealth without, if it weren't for Wexner. How could they not have spoken to him yet? Absolutely. Do they not have to go to Acosta?
There has to be a deeper dive into why this was not investigated before now. And it's important for viewers to understand this is not a partisan issue. This is not a political issue, because these are previous DOJs that were run under different administrations that were essentially truly independent, saying nothing of where we are now. But there were literally decades that attorneys were aware of who Wexner was and his relationship to Epstein, and yet and still there was nothing done. So you're absolutely right. Acosta has to be, if not next, certainly in line in terms of who gets spoken to.
Perhaps because really rich and powerful people can influence politicians regardless of their political party. Congressman Garcia, I said it at the top, said during the deposition, Wexner has not been questioned by the DOJ, but Wexner said he, at one point, or in the documents, one point it says he was a co-conspirator, and then later in the documents it says had very little involvement. doesn't that make it complicated to even cover this? Because it's like, pick the email that suits your narrative.
Well, this is sort of the challenge with all of this, right? I mean, you know, when we have these conversations about the Epstein files, none of us even really has a grasp of how many files there are. And one of the patterns that we've seen in American politics over the course of the past 10, 15 years is this pattern of picking out things that fit narratives, right? And Donald Trump has benefited from this enormously. We look at WikiLeaks in 2016. Like, we've seen this pattern over and over again. I do think it's remarkable, though, that we're at this moment with the Epstein files where there's this constant conversation about it. And yes, there's absolutely politics at play here, right? Garcia, you know, he's making a point against Donald Trump. A lot of the left is enjoying this because it's putting Republicans on the hot seat. But it is also the case that, to your point, no one has done more to imply that this is a substantial cover-up than the Trump administration, right? Pam Bondi came out a year ago and said, oh, there's nothing else to see here, when now we see all of this stuff. And so it's remarkable how much Donald Trump and his administration have made their own bed on this issue as well, and therefore that it continues to have legs.
I want to share this quote from the New York Times because they talk about Epstein's social prominence. And they said, it shows how a group can collude with dark secrets if they're sufficiently ambiguous and serve their interests. You have spent years chronicling the lives of the ultra-wealthy. How damaging is this kind of exposure?
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons there's so much magnetism to uncovering whatever is there behind Jeffrey Epstein, because it's an unusual window into how power and elite money and malfeasance all can intersect and go on for a very long time. I think, you know, one of the foundational reasons Les Wexner matters is he seeded Jeffrey Epstein's fortune. And Jeffrey Epstein had no discernible market smarts. He had no apparent ability actually to be a good investor. What he had...
Didn't even have a college education.
Right. But he had an ability to get wealthy people to just give him humongous sums of money almost unasked, starting with Les Wexner and going all the way on to Leon Black. And why did that keep happening? And I think it kept happening for two reasons. Greed. People simply thought he might be able to make them money. Access. They wanted a seat at the dining room table in his townhouse. Right. Or sex.
Rhymes with smackmail.
Or blackmail, or you know, the completely uncovered thing in this whole thing, undercovered in all this, still remains the money trail. I think we've gotten a lot of information about sexual abuse and predation, but we still don't understand enough about why Leon Black was entrusting Jeffrey Epstein to move money offshore for him so he could avoid paying taxes, and why Donald Trump might have done the same thing. Epstein had connections in Eastern Europe. He clearly was able to move money through Eastern European banks. You get into the whole Russian nexus and all of this. And that I think might be one of the things still lurking in the DOJ's files.
This thing, I mean, the midterms, excuse me, are 250 odd days away. This issue is not going away, and strangely, it almost seems to be the one thing that's unifying Americans in a way that we have not seen in years.
It's a mainstream issue now. 2/3 of Americans believe that the powerful are not being held to account. 3/4 believe that the government is hiding information. Majorities, supermajorities of Democrats and independents, and majority of Republicans feel the same way. It's something that organically, every night, we're talking to Americans, asking them what's breaking through the news, and this is constantly being, we're constantly kind of hearing about this. So, yes.
The White House has to hear these numbers. Sure. And when you've got Pam Bondi's disastrous performance last week, when you've got Howard Lutnick, who might not be guilty of any wrongdoing, but clearly lying to the American people, does this not damage them publicly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would be very hard to argue that Epstein has not damaged Trump. The question then goes back to the standard Trump question, which is what actually moves him into action, right? And one of the things that we've seen with this is that what has consistently motivated him is his base turning on him a little bit. He has actually managed to contain the fallout of this from his base to some extent by pushing it off on other people. And a lot of his base is willing to say, oh, yeah, I saw Clinton in there. He's right. It's all Democrats, right? All this nonsense.
And Clinton's like, great, I'll see you next Thursday.
Yeah, right. So that continues to be the guiding, the focus for Donald Trump. What does the base think about it? He seems to be insulated from the base's rancor on this. And I do think it's worth pointing out how amazing that is, given that his first term was totally preoccupied with this idea that he was out there fighting sex predators and that there was this cabal of elites who were involved in predation on young children that became QAnon. And that was so much of his first term in office. And now he's like, well, no, there's nothing to see here. It's all the Democrats. And his base seems to be buying it.